Rain hammered against the black umbrellas as the city's most feared men lined up behind the coffin. No one spoke. No one dared breathe. The Mafia boss, the man who ruled the underworld with iron and fire, was gone, or so everyone believed. Priests whispered prayers. Men who had killed without blinking now wiped tears they hoped no one would see. His mother clutched her chest, trembling. His right-hand man could barely hold the umbrella steady, and just as the coffin was being lowered, a small voice cut through the storm. "Stop! Don't put him in the ground! He's not dead!" Everyone turned. A little girl, soaked, shivering, clutching a school backpack, ran past the guards before anyone could stop her. Mud splashed across the marble grave as she threw herself beside the coffin. The guards reached for her. She screamed louder. "Please, he's not dead! I heard him!" The underboss grabbed her wrist. "Little girl, this is no place for games. Do you know who this man was?" She lifted her face, eyes wide, terrified, but certain. "I know exactly who he is, and I know he's still alive, because he called my name, right before you put him in that box." A ripple of dread swept across the funeral. Some men swore they felt the ground shift. Others stepped back from the coffin as if expecting it to move. The priest dropped his book. The boss's mother gasped, clutching the girl's face with trembling hands. "How do you know that?" she whispered. The girl dug into her backpack, hands shaking, and pulled out something no one expected, something that made even the toughest Mafia soldier stagger back in fear. And in that moment, the funeral became a battlefield between truth and death itself. Stay with me until the end, because what this little girl reveals about the dead Mafia boss will flip this entire funeral on its head. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. 3 days before that stormy funeral, the most powerful man in the city had seemed completely untouchable. Vincent the Iron Torino controlled everything from the docks to the downtown casinos. Politicians answered his calls. Judges followed his suggestions. Even the police commissioner sent Christmas cards to his estate every year. But Vincent had one weakness that nobody in his world understood. Every Tuesday afternoon, he would disappear from his fortress-like mansion. No bodyguards, no bulletproof car. Just him walking alone through the poorest neighborhood in the city. His men thought he was collecting debts. His enemies assumed he was meeting secret contacts. The truth was far more dangerous to his reputation than any of them could have imagined. Vincent Torino spent his Tuesday afternoons reading stories to children at St. Mary's Community Center. The same hands that had signed death warrants would carefully turn pages of fairy tales. The same voice that had ordered executions would whisper about dragons and princesses to kids who barely had shoes that fit. Among those children was 8-year-old Sofia Martinez. She had lived in the center since her parents died in a car accident 2 years earlier. Sofia was different from the other kids. She noticed things others missed. She remembered conversations word for word. She could read people's faces like books. And she was the only child who knew the gentle man who read to them every Tuesday was the same Vincent Torino whose picture appeared on wanted posters throughout the city. But Sofia never said a word. Not because she was scared, because she understood something the adults didn't. Behind those cold eyes that terrified grown men was someone who needed those Tuesday afternoons just as much as the children did. Vincent had started volunteering at the center after his own daughter died in a hospital bed 3 years earlier. 7-year-old Isabella had fought leukemia for 2 years before losing the battle. In her final weeks, she had made Vincent promise something that changed his life forever. "Daddy," she had whispered, her small hand squeezing his massive fingers. "Promise me you'll read stories to other kids who don't have parents. Promise me you'll help them feel less alone." Vincent had nodded through tears, never imagining how much those Tuesday visits would come to mean to him. The children at St. Mary's didn't know about his crimes. They didn't fear his reputation. They just knew him as Mr. V, the big man with the gentle voice who made fairy tales come alive. Sophia was his favorite, though he would never admit it. She reminded him of Isabella with her quick mind and fearless questions. She would sit closest to him during story time, sometimes falling asleep against his shoulder when the tales ran long. Last Tuesday had been different. Vincent had arrived at the center looking pale and exhausted. His hands shook slightly as he opened the storybook. Sophia noticed immediately. "Mr. V, are you sick?" she had asked quietly while the other children played. Vincent had looked down at her with tired eyes. "Sometimes grown-ups get very tired, little one. But don't worry about me." But Sophia was worried. She had seen that same look on her father's face the day before the accident. The look of someone carrying a secret too heavy to bear. What Sophia didn't know was that Vincent's own organization was planning to eliminate him. His underboss, Marco Salvetti, had been secretly building alliances with rival families. Vincent's softer approach to business in recent years had made him enemies among his own men. They whispered that grief had made him weak, that his mysterious Tuesday disappearances proved he was losing his edge. Some even suggested he was meeting with federal agents, planning to turn state's evidence. The truth was simpler and more dangerous to Marco's plans. Vincent was becoming human again, and human bosses don't last long in a world built on fear. Marco had been planning Vincent's assassination for months, but he needed it to look natural. A heart attack would be perfect. No investigation, no war with other families, just a tragic end to a legendary leader. The plan was set for Wednesday morning. Vincent's coffee would be laced with a rare poison that mimicked cardiac arrest. By evening, the most feared man in the city would be declared dead from natural causes. But Marco had made one critical mistake. He underestimated the connection between Vincent and a little girl who noticed everything. On that final Tuesday, as Vincent finished reading about a brave princess who saved her kingdom, Sophia had whispered something that would haunt him. "Mr. V, if something bad ever happens to you, I want you to know that someone will remember the real you. Not the scary stories people tell, but the real you who makes children feel safe." Vincent had stared at her for a long moment, wondering how this 8-year-old could see straight through to his soul. He had squeezed her small hand gently. "Thank you, Sophia. That means more to me than you could ever know." Those were the last words he would speak as a free man. By Wednesday evening, Vincent Torino would be declared dead. By Thursday, his body would be prepared for burial. By Friday, the most elaborate funeral in the city's history would be underway. But nobody had counted on Sophia Martinez. Nobody had expected that a little girl from St. Mary's Community Center would be the only person in the entire city brave enough to challenge death itself. What Sophia pulled from her backpack was Vincent's personal cell phone, the same device that contained recordings of every conversation he'd had with Marco over the past 3 months. The same phone that held evidence of the assassination plot. The same phone that was supposed to have been destroyed the moment Vincent collapsed. But Sophia had been there that morning. She had witnessed everything. Wednesday had started like any other day at St. Mary's Community Center. Sophia was helping serve breakfast when she noticed a black car parked across the street. The same car had been there for 3 days in a row. Something felt wrong. By 10 in the morning, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that Mr. V was in danger. She had learned to trust her instincts after living on the streets before coming to the center. Those instincts had kept her alive more than once. Against all rules, Sophia snuck out of the center and made her way to Vincent's mansion. She had followed him home once before, curious about where the gentle man who read stories actually lived. What she discovered had shocked her then, but today, that knowledge might save his life. Sophia climbed the oak tree outside Vincent's study window, the same tree she had used to spy on him months earlier. Through the glass, she watched Vincent pour his morning coffee. She saw him take the first sip. She saw his face change from confusion to terror as he realized what was happening. Vincent had dropped the cup, stumbling backward as the poison began to take effect. But he wasn't dead. Not yet. The dosage Marco had used was designed to mimic death, not cause it immediately. Vincent would appear to die, be pronounced dead, and then actually die hours later in his coffin. Sophia watched in horror as Vincent collapsed behind his desk. She saw Marco enter the room minutes later with a team of men. She heard Marco check for a pulse and declare Vincent dead. She watched them carry his unconscious body away. But Sophia had also seen something else. In those final moments before collapsing, Vincent had reached for his phone. His fingers had managed to press the record button. Every word Marco spoke afterward was captured. When the men left the study, Sophia had climbed through the window and grabbed the phone. She had no plan beyond knowing that evidence of what she witnessed needed to be preserved. For 2 days, Sophia had kept Vincent's phone hidden in her backpack. She listened to the recordings over and over, trying to understand the full scope of what Marco had done. She heard conversations about bribing the medical examiner. She heard plans to divide Vincent's territory among the other families. She heard Marco laughing about how easy it had been to fool everyone. But most importantly, Sophia heard something else on those recordings. Sounds that proved Vincent was still alive during his own medical examination. The medical examiner had been paid handsomely to declare Vincent dead without conducting a thorough examination. But the phone, still recording in Vincent's jacket pocket, had captured everything. The shallow breathing, the faint heartbeat, the barely audible whispers of a man fighting to stay alive while trapped in his own paralyzed body. Now, standing in the mud beside Vincent's coffin, Sophia held that phone up for everyone to see. Her small hands shook as she pressed play. Vincent's voice echoed across the graveyard, weak but unmistakable. "Sophia, if you can hear this, tell them, Marco poisoned, not dead. Help me." The recording had been made sometime during the night before the funeral. Vincent had managed to regain enough consciousness to whisper into the phone, hoping against hope that someone would find it and understand. The funeral crowd erupted in chaos. Some men drew weapons, unsure who to trust or what to believe. Others backed away from the coffin in superstitious terror. Marco's face went white as he realized his carefully constructed plan was crumbling. Vincent's mother fell to her knees beside the coffin, pressing her ear against the wood. "Vincent? Vincent, can you hear me?" And then, from inside the coffin, came the sound that would haunt everyone present for the rest of their lives. A weak knocking. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. The same pattern Vincent had taught Sophia months earlier when explaining Morse code during one of their story sessions. SOS. The underboss Marco stepped forward, his hand moving toward his gun. "This is impossible. I checked his pulse myself. The medical examiner confirmed it. This little girl is lying." But Sophia wasn't finished. She had one more recording to play, the one that would destroy Marco completely. "Listen to this," Sophia said, her voice carrying across the silent graveyard. She pressed play on another audio file. Marco's voice filled the air, clear and damning. "The poison will keep him paralyzed for 72 hours. He'll appear dead to anyone who doesn't know what to look for. By the time he actually dies in that coffin, it'll be too late for anyone to save him. And I'll be the new head of this family." The silence that followed was deafening. Every man present understood what they had just heard. Their underboss had attempted to bury their leader alive. But Marco wasn't going down without a fight. In one swift motion, he pulled his gun and pointed it directly at Sophia's head. "You shouldn't have come here, little girl. Some secrets are worth killing for." Vincent's mother screamed. The other men froze, unsure whether to protect the child or their soon-to-be former leader. The priest muttered prayers under his breath. And Sophia, 8 years old and staring down the barrel of a gun, did something that would become legendary in the city's underground. She smiled. "You're too late, Marco. I already sent copies of everything to the police, the FBI, and every newspaper in the city. They'll be here any minute." As if summoned by her words, the sound of sirens began to echo in the distance, getting closer, getting louder. Marco's hand began to shake. He had 2 choices: kill a child in front of dozens of witnesses, or surrender and hope for mercy from a justice system that showed none to men like him. But before Marco could make his decision, the coffin beside them began to move. The wooden lid of the coffin shifted with a grinding sound that made everyone's blood run cold. Not the gentle movement of settling wood, but the deliberate push of something alive, fighting to escape from within. Marco's gun wavered as he stared at the impossible sight. The other men crossed themselves, muttering prayers their mothers had taught them decades ago. Even the hardest killers among them had never seen anything like this. "Open it," Vincent's mother commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Open that coffin right now." Two of Vincent's most loyal soldiers stepped forward, their hands trembling as they reached for the latches. Marco swung his gun toward them, but it was too late. The sirens were getting closer, and his window of control was closing fast. The first latch clicked open, then the second. The heavy lid began to rise, and what emerged from that coffin would be burned into the memory of every person present for the rest of their lives. Vincent Torino's eyes opened first, bloodshot, unfocused, but unmistakably alive. His skin had the gray pallor of someone who had been dancing with death for 3 days, but his chest rose and fell with shallow, desperate breaths. "Water," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the storm. "Please, water." Sophia dropped Marco's phone and ran to Vincent's side, pulling a small water bottle from her backpack. With the care of someone far older than her 8 years, she helped lift his head and pressed the bottle to his lips. Vincent's eyes found hers, and in that moment, something passed between them that no one else could understand. Gratitude, recognition, and a bond forged in the darkest hours of human experience. "You came," he whispered to Sophia. "I knew you would hear me calling." The crowd watched in stunned silence as Vincent slowly sat up in his own coffin. The poison had left him weak, but alive. His coordination was shattered, his speech slurred, but his mind was sharp enough to understand what had happened. He turned his gaze to Marco, and the temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees. "Hello, cousin. Enjoying my funeral?" Marco's face cycled through emotions like a broken slot machine. Fear, rage, desperation, calculation. The gun in his hand seemed to grow heavier with each passing second. "This isn't possible," Marco muttered. "I watched you die. I felt your pulse stop." Vincent struggled to his feet with Sophia's help, using the edge of the coffin for support. "You felt what you wanted to feel. The pulse was there, just too weak for someone who wasn't really looking." The sirens were close now. Police cars, FBI vehicles, ambulances. Sophia's bluff about sending evidence to the authorities was about to become reality, whether she had actually done it or not. Marco realized his time was running out. In desperation, he grabbed Sophia and pressed the gun to her temple. "Everyone stay back. I'll kill her. I swear I will." But Marco had made a fatal error in judgment. He had threatened the one person in the world that Vincent Torino would die to protect, the little girl who had read his soul and saved his life. Vincent's weakness seemed to evaporate in an instant. The poison was still in his system. His body was still shutting down, but his mind focused with laser intensity on the man holding a gun to Sophia's head. "Marco," Vincent said, his voice gaining strength with every word. "You poisoned me. You tried to bury me alive. You've destroyed our family and betrayed everything we stand for. But threatening that child, that's the mistake that's going to cost you everything." The other men began to close in around Marco, their loyalty shifting like sand in an earthquake. They had followed him for 3 days, believing their boss was dead. Now they saw Vincent alive, and Marco exposed as a traitor. "I said stay back!" Marco screamed, pressing the gun harder against Sophia's temple. But Sophia wasn't afraid. Not anymore. She had faced down death itself and won. A panicked man with a gun was just another problem to solve. "Marco," she said calmly, her young voice carrying an authority that seemed impossible for her age. "Do you know what Vincent taught me about bullies?" Marco blinked, confused by the question. "What?" "He taught me that bullies are just scared people who think being mean makes them strong. But you know what really makes someone strong? Before Marco could answer, Sophia bit down hard on his wrist and twisted away from the gun in one fluid motion. Vincent lunged forward despite his weakened state, and 3 of his men tackled Marco to the muddy ground. The gun went off, the bullet sailing harmlessly into the storm clouds above. Marco's scream of rage was cut short as Vincent's fist connected with his jaw. "That's for the poison," Vincent growled. Another punch. "That's for the betrayal." A third blow that left Marco unconscious in the mud. "And that's for threatening my daughter." The word hung in the air like a revelation. Daughter. Not the little girl from the community center. Not just someone who had saved his life. In that moment, Vincent Torino had claimed Sofia Martinez as family. The first police car skidded to a stop at the cemetery entrance, followed by a convoy of federal vehicles. Detective Sarah Chen stepped out of the lead car, her experienced eyes taking in the surreal scene before her. A Mafia funeral interrupted by resurrection. A little girl standing beside a coffin holding a cell phone. The city's most feared crime boss very much alive and covered in grave dirt, and an unconscious underboss with a smoking gun beside him in the mud. "Well," Detective Chen said to her partner, "I've seen everything now." But the story was far from over. As the paramedics rushed to check Vincent's vital signs and the FBI agents began arresting Marco's conspirators, Sophia quietly slipped Vincent's phone back into her backpack. She had played the recordings that saved his life, but there were other files on that device. Conversations, transactions, evidence of crimes that went back years. Information that could bring down half the criminal organizations in the city. Sophia understood something the adults didn't yet realize. Vincent Torino's resurrection wasn't just about one man cheating death. It was about the complete transformation of the city's power structure. And she, an 8-year-old girl with a backpack full of secrets, was now the most important witness in the biggest case of the century. Vincent caught her eye as the paramedics loaded him onto a stretcher. "Sophia," he called weakly, "stay close to me. We have a lot to talk about." She nodded, following the stretcher toward the ambulance. "I know, Mr. V. I know exactly what we need to talk about." Detective Chen watched the little girl climb into the ambulance beside the crime boss, her instincts telling her that the real story was just beginning. Whatever evidence Sophia had collected, whatever recordings she had made, whatever secrets she carried in that innocent-looking backpack, could reshape the entire criminal landscape of the city. As the ambulance pulled away from the cemetery, Vincent reached out and took Sophia's small hand in his large one. "You saved my life today," he whispered. Sophia squeezed his fingers gently. "And now you get to save other people's lives. That's how the story is supposed to end, right? The good guys win?" Vincent smiled for the first time in 3 days. "Yes, little one. That's exactly how this story ends." But outside the ambulance windows, the storm continued to rage, and in the shadows of the city, other men were already making plans to fill the power vacuum left by Marco's arrest and Vincent's apparent transformation. The funeral was over, but the real battle for the soul of the city was just beginning. Just beginning. But the moment that ambulance disappeared into the storm, the real consequences of Sophia's actions began to unfold across the city like dominoes falling in slow motion. In his penthouse office overlooking the harbor, Carmine, the shark Benedetti received the phone call that would change everything. His cigar fell from his lips as his lieutenant delivered the impossible news. Vincent Torino was alive. Marco Salvetti was in federal custody, and an 8-year-old girl had recordings that could destroy them all. Carmine had been Vincent's biggest rival for over a decade. Their families had maintained an uneasy peace. But with Vincent supposedly dead, Carmine had already begun moving his operations into Torino territory. Now Vincent's resurrection meant war was inevitable. "How much does the little girl know?" Carmine asked, his voice deadly calm. "Everything, boss. They're saying she has Vincent's phone. 3 months of recordings. Names, dates, locations. If the feds get their hands on that evidence," Carmine crushed his cigar in the crystal ashtray, "then we make sure they don't." Find out everything about this Sofia Martinez. Where she lives, where she goes to school, who protects her. I want options. But Carmine wasn't the only one making emergency plans. Across the city, corrupt officials who had been on Vincent's payroll were frantically destroying evidence. Police commissioners shredded files. Judges burned documents. City councilmen deleted phone records. Because if Sofia's recordings contained what everyone suspected, the investigation wouldn't stop with Marco Salvetti. It would reach into every corner of the city's power structure, exposing decades of corruption and conspiracy. At St. Mary's Community Center, Sister Margaret was packing Sofia's few belongings with trembling hands. The FBI had called ahead, informing her that Sofia would need to enter protective custody immediately. The center's peaceful routine had been shattered by the revelation that their quiet little girl was now the most valuable witness in federal history. "Where will they take her?" asked Mrs. Chen, the center's cook, who had grown fond of Sofia's help in the kitchen. Sister Margaret folded Sofia's spare dress carefully. "Somewhere safe," they said. "Somewhere far from here until the trials are finished." But the elderly nun couldn't shake the feeling that nowhere would be safe for Sofia now. Too many powerful people had too much to lose. Meanwhile, at Metropolitan General Hospital, Vincent was fighting battles on multiple fronts. His body was slowly purging the poison from his system, but the damage was extensive. The doctors warned him that his heart had been severely weakened. His nervous system might never fully recover. He would need months of rehabilitation just to walk normally again. More pressing was the parade of federal agents who wanted to interview him. The FBI, DEA, IRS, and half a dozen other agencies had been waiting years for an opportunity to flip Vincent Torino. Now they had him in a hospital bed, vulnerable and dependent on their protection. Agent Rebecca Martinez, no relation to Sofia despite the shared surname, was the lead prosecutor assigned to the case. She sat beside Vincent's bed with a stack of files 3 inches thick. "Mr. Torino, you have an opportunity here that men in your position rarely get," she said quietly. "A chance to walk away from this life and start over. But that window won't stay open long. Your enemies are already mobilizing." Vincent's voice was still weak, but his mind was sharp. "What exactly are you offering?" "Full immunity for your cooperation. New identity, relocation anywhere you want. Protection for you and anyone you consider family." Agent Martinez paused meaningfully. "Including Sofia." The mention of Sofia's name changed everything in Vincent's expression. The hardened crime boss vanished, replaced by something Agent Martinez had never seen before in 30 years of prosecuting organized crime. A man who had found something worth more than power or money. "What do you need from me?" Vincent asked. "Everything. Names, operations, financial records, murder contracts. We want to dismantle not just your organization, but every family you've done business with. This is our chance to clean up the city once and for all." Vincent closed his eyes, considering the magnitude of what she was asking. Betraying the code he had lived by for 40 years. Destroying men who had been loyal to him. Admitting to crimes that would shock even his enemies. But then he thought about Sofia, alone and frightened, carrying secrets too dangerous for any child to bear. He thought about the promise he had made to his dying daughter, Isabella. He thought about the Tuesday afternoons reading stories to children who deserved better than a world built on violence and fear. "I'll need guarantees," Vincent said finally. "Sofia's safety comes first. Non-negotiable. She gets a full scholarship to any school she chooses. College fund, medical coverage, everything she needs for a normal life." Agent Martinez leaned forward. "Done. What else?" "The community center. St. Mary's needs funding. Anonymous donations, but enough to keep it running permanently. Those kids depend on that place." "Agreed. Anything else?" Vincent was quiet for a long moment, staring at the ceiling tiles. "I want to see Sofia before I start talking. I need to explain to her what's going to happen. She deserves to hear it from me." 3 hours later, Sofia sat beside Vincent's hospital bed, her small legs swinging from the oversized chair. Her backpack was in her lap, and Vincent's phone was finally in the hands of federal agents who were discovering just how extensive his recorded evidence really was. "Are you going to jail?" Sophia asked with the directness that only children possess. Vincent managed a weak smile. "Probably not, but I am going to have to go away for a while. Somewhere safe where the bad men can't find me." "Like witness protection?" Vincent blinked in surprise. "How do you know about witness protection?" "I watch a lot of TV when I can't sleep. Are they going to give you a new name and everything?" "Yes, little one. A completely new life." Sophia nodded solemnly. "That's good." Vincent Torino was scary. But Mr. V, who reads stories, he was nice. "Maybe your new name can be more like Mr. V." The simplicity of her observation hit Vincent harder than any sermon or lecture ever could. She was right. Vincent Torino, the crime boss, had been a monster. But somewhere along the way, in those Tuesday afternoon story sessions, he had remembered how to be human. "Sophia, they want me to testify against some very dangerous people. It's going to make a lot of bad men very angry. They might try to hurt anyone who helped me." Sophia's eyes grew wide. "They want to hurt me? They might try. But the FBI is going to keep you safe. They're going to give you a new name, too, and send you somewhere far away where you can go to a real school and have a real family." Tears began to form in Sophia's eyes. "But I don't want a new family. I want to stay with you." Vincent felt his heart breaking in ways that 40 years of violence had never managed. "Sweetheart, I'm not safe to be around. The life I chose, the things I've done, they follow me everywhere. You deserve better than that. But you're different now. I can tell. You're not the same person who did those bad things." "Maybe not. But the consequences of those bad things don't just disappear because I changed. They'll follow me forever." Sophia was quiet for a moment, processing this with the wisdom that seemed impossible for her age. "Will I ever see you again?" Vincent wanted to lie, to give her false hope, but he owed her honesty. "I don't know. Maybe someday, when all of this is over and the dangerous people are gone. But it might be a very long time." Sophia squeezed Vincent's hand one last time before the agents led her away to her new life. 6 months later, headlines across the country told the story of the biggest organized crime takedown in history. Vincent's testimony brought down 14 crime families, corrupt officials, and an entire network of criminal enterprises. But the real story wasn't in the newspapers. It was in a small town 3 states away, where a little girl named Emma started 3rd grade at a school where nobody knew her past. And somewhere else, a man named Thomas volunteered at a children's hospital, reading stories to sick kids who reminded him of the daughter he'd lost and the brave girl who'd saved his soul. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest truths. Sometimes courage comes in the most unexpected packages. And sometimes stopping a funeral is just the beginning of saving a life.